Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, I'm Wendy Wendland, Acting President of Environment America. Environment America protects the places we love and promotes core environmental values, such as clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean energy to power our lives. We're a national network working with offices in 29 states and members in every state in the country. Together, we focus on timely, targeted action that wins tangible improvements in the quality of our environment and our lives. For the next hour, we're going to talk about how state and local action has and continues to propel America forward to be powered by 100% renewable energy. We'll start with a quick overview from our own Johanna Newman, who's the Senior Director of our campaign for 100% renewable energy. Then we have 3 state and local elected officials from Sacramento, Pennsylvania, and Florida, respectively. And then we should have time at the end for Q&A. You'll be able to put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. Some logistics, just to let you know that we are recording this, and it is being streamed on Facebook, and will be available in the Environment America YouTube channel, should you have missed part of it. So let's go ahead and get started. And again, thank you so much to everybody who has joined us as a panelist, and thanks to all of you who are joining us for this session. This is an issue that we're extremely excited about. We put a lot of time and energy into it across the country, and excited about the potential. So we're going to start with Johanna. So Johanna directs strategy and staff for Environment America's clean energy programs at the state, national, and local levels. She has a long history of public interest activism. She led the campaign to ban smoking in Maryland workplaces. She helped to stop the construction of a nuclear reactor along the shores of the Chesapeake Bay. And she helped to build the support necessary for the Maryland Empower Act, which set a goal of reducing the state's per capita electricity use by 15%. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Johanna.
Thanks so much, Wendy, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I love my job as the Senior Director of Environment America's campaign for 100% renewable energy. And if you're interested, I'd love to be connected with you all on Twitter. My Twitter ID is right there. If I could get the next slide, Emma. So part of the reason why I love working on energy is because it touches every aspect of our lives. And when I think about the future that we're trying to build for my children, I have 2 sons, and subsequently their children, it is increasingly a world where we power every aspect of our lives with clean renewable energy that never runs out. So it means we're tapping the power of the sun, the strength of the wind, the warmth of the earth itself, and our energy systems as a society kind of mirror the systems that we find in nature, which are regenerative and restorative and very efficient and quite elegant. So that's the vision that our energy program is really aiming at. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we're still pretty far away from that vision. Close to 90% of America's energy comes from dirty sources. And our reliance on dirty energy really threatens our health and our environment at every stage of their process. So here you can see an example of mountaintop removal mining, which is the extraction of fossil fuels. Next slide. Fossil fuels harm our health in the refining process, as you can see with the air pollution coming out of this refinery in Louisiana. Next slide. The transport of dirty energy poses environmental and public health risks, everything from explosions of oil trains to leaks in pipelines or drilling wells, as this bird was exposed to. And then lastly, the combustion of dirty energy threatens our health by putting toxins into the air. And then there's the elephant in the room, next slide please, which is global warming. And our reliance on dirty sources of energy is really the prime driver of the pollution that is warming our planet. And so in a nutshell, the longer that we stay dependent on dirty sources of energy, the longer we suffer the harm of all of these kind of environmentally and public health impacts. Thankfully, it doesn't have to stay this way. You know, solutions abound, and Environment America Research and Policy Center is really working to promote a vision of a future powered by 100% renewable energy. And the exciting thing about this vision is that the obstacles to reaching it aren't physical obstacles. They are obstacles of imagination and obstacles of commitment. So let me explain why I feel confident saying that. This slide draws from data from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a small black circle, which represents graphically the total annual electricity consumption of the United States. By contrast, on the right-hand side of the slide, in the large, bold, colored nesting circles, you can see the amount of electricity that we have the technical capacity to harness from a bunch of different sources. So that big gold circle represents utility scale solar. And we, just by relying on solar alone, could meet our electricity demands as a nation 100 times over. If we chose to do it with wind, we could meet our electricity needs 10 times over as a country. And every single state in the United States can actually power itself 100% with renewable energy by tapping into these resources. So, you know, each of these technologies, from offshore wind to rooftop solar to utility scale solar, the costs continue to come down as the technology improves. And, you know, we could have a whole other webinar on kind of the exciting technological developments. But for me, the take home here is that what's standing in the way of 100% of kind of moving towards a vision of 100% renewable energy isn't any kind of physical barrier. It's a barrier of imagination and a barrier of commitment. And I think the big challenge for us is, how do we build the collective will to move towards that future together? And in some ways, we're already on the journey. So if I could have the next slide, please. You know, Environment America has been working on energy issues for decades. And what we have seen in our advocacy and our policy work is a virtuous cycle where, when you set big goals around clean energy, those goals can drive action. And then that action begets success. And that success breeds confidence that we can do more, which then leads to greater ambition and subsequent bolder goal setting. And one of the things that is really exciting to me is that this cycle is happening everywhere. It involves all of America, and it transcends, I think, a dominant narrative that currently exists in the United States that, I don't know, like progress is partisan in some way. Our progress on clean energy totally defies that narrative. It defies the urban-rural divide, and it defies the partisan divide. If I could see the next slide, please. So, you know, clean energy it's growing in every state across America. And the map that I'm showing you here shows all the states across America that have set some kind of renewable electricity standard for their state, or renewable electricity target for their utilities to meet. And 29 states have done this all across the country: red states, blue states, urban states, rural states, it doesn't matter. And the deep blue states on this map are actually states that have then revisited their clean energy commitments and ratcheted them up. And so, you know, again, that virtuous cycle is at work. So there's some good graphic representations here, but there are also amazing stories across America. And I think about, for example, Iowa, where that state's commitment to renewable energy has really propelled Iowa forward in terms of developing its wind potential. And because of the way they've structured it, farmers have been able to install wind turbines on their land and be able to keep the family farm that's been in the family for generations, in part because of the proceeds that they get from the clean energy that they produce on site. And one Once a year, Environment America Research and Policy Center puts out a report called Renewables on the Rise. If I could see the next slide. And this report details state by state the growth of key clean energy technologies. And so I just pulled out the data for Iowa, and you can just see the growth in wind power in that state over the course of the past decade. And despite its relatively small size, Iowa ranks 4th in the country for generation of electricity from wind, in part because of that state's commitment and belief in furthering renewable energy. And if you're curious, you can go check out our Renewables on the Rise report and see how your state is doing on these key technologies. Another story that I think of about how states are leading the way in terms of clean energy is California, which set a goal of powering itself 100% with clean energy by 2045. And what's exciting about California is this is a classic example of setting a bold goal that then causes action to come from it. So, in California, they have now made solar standard on all new homes, in part because they recognize the missed opportunity of not installing solar when workers are on the roof. And this idea of repowering itself with 100% renewable energy hasn't just stayed in California, it's actually spread to other states. And so on this slide, all of the orange states are states that have actually committed to 100% clean or 100% renewable energy targets. And the more yellowish states are states where there's active legislation and there are state level lawmakers and regulators who are pushing this idea of reaching 100% renewable energy. It's not just the states where this idea is catching on. More than 150 cities in the United States have also committed to big, bold, 100% clean or renewable energy targets. And all of this work really adds up. So earlier this year, my colleague Emma Searson crunched some numbers, and if you add up the state commitments and the city commitments, fully 1 in 3 Americans lives in a community that's committed to 100% clean or 100% renewable electricity. And that's big, that's real commitment. But we're also seeing actual progress on each technology as well. So over the past decade, solar power has grown 30-fold in America. We get 3 times as much power from wind as we did 10 years ago. We have 20 times as much battery storage. Our ability to use energy wisely has gotten much better, and we're saving 1.5 times as much electricity through efficiency than we did in 2010. Electric vehicles are on the rise, and renewables now make up 10% of our nation's electricity usage. When I first started doing this work, it was an invisible sliver on the pie chart, and now it's actually on the map. So that's really exciting. And our challenge is moving on to the remaining 90% and getting that clean. And that's really, I want to spend just a minute talking about our game plan. So our plan is to continue demonstrating the broad and diverse public support that exists for clean energy, and demonstrating how that support really transcends party lines, and then doing that people-powered organizing and advocacy to help fuel the virtuous cycle. And so if I could have the next slide. We are, over the course of this next year, engaging in all steps of this cycle, from setting the big goal all the way to moving forward ambition. So for example, Environment Florida Research and Policy Center is doing a lot of work at the city level in Tampa to get that large municipality to join others in the important I-4 corridor to commit to 100% renewable energy. Lawmakers across the country, from Pennsylvania to Georgia to Texas, are going to be introducing 100% renewable legislation. There's also a lot of action happening. So I think about the specific bills to improve appliance efficiency standards or restrict the burning of fossil fuels directly in our homes. we cheer on progress every step of the way. And then there are also just real opportunities to increase ambition. I think specifically here about Pennsylvania and how next year there's going to be a conversation in that, really important state about whether that state should update its renewable electricity standard. And so that is a spot right now where I think we can fan the flames and say, you know what, the Keystone State has tremendous clean energy potential, and let's set our sights high and aim high and tap into those resources. So I'm incredibly excited about the growth that's going to be happening over the course of the next year. It'll take a lot of hard work, and it'll take a lot of local leadership. And so I guess I'll stop there, Wendy, and I'm just really excited to hear from some of the local leaders who are advancing this at the state and local level.
Okay. Thank you so much, Johanna, for laying out the framework for what we're going to talk about today. Our first panelist is Heidi Sanborn, who is a board member of the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, or what we call in California, SMUD, which has a recent history of having been a leader in environmental reforms ever since my old friend David Freeman took over. And we mourn his passing this year. For those of you who are David Freeman fans, I just had to squeeze that in since we're talking about SMUD. So Heidi is an elected board member. SMUD is a community-owned utility. I'm sure she'll talk more about that. And another interesting fact about Heidi is I actually know her better for her work on extended producer responsibility, that she's really a national leader in that field, which is just a fancy way of saying we should not send as much crap to our landfills. The producers should be more responsible for the things they produce on the front end. But that is a subject for a different webinar. Today, we're talking about 100% clean energy. And Dan Jacobson, our state director in California, Environment California's director, says Heidi is a great organizer. And we loved working with her on getting SMUD to adopt 100% clean energy. So we're anxious to hear more about how that happened. Thanks, Heidi.
Thanks so much, Wendy. It's a real honor to be an elected official on the SMUD board at a time when we really have to pivot quickly. And I'm very proud to sit with 6 other board members who feel the way I do, and how we got a 7-0 vote to pass the most rigorous climate resolution in the country. And I'm just very proud of our board. I'm proud of our staff and everything that we're doing. So I just want to share with you, and I appreciate the opportunity, Wendy. Thank you. And actually what I do in my day job does affect climate very much, because the more stuff we produce and move around, it actually does affect climate, as you know. So we'll talk about leading the way to zero, how we have at SMUD a 2030 carbon plan. And I really appreciate being invited today to here in my home in Sacramento. I actually moved in yesterday, and I just got it from the neck up, basically looking good in time for this. But I'm really grateful to share the opportunity with all of you today on, and also excited to hear about the other panelists and what they've been doing in Pennsylvania and also in Florida. Next slide, please. So our SMUD clean energy vision is the most aggressive and ambitious carbon reduction effort in the country. It made international news when we passed it in July. It commits us to reaching absolute zero carbon emissions by the end of the decade. And again, my board colleagues, we were a 7-0 vote. We believe the threat of climate change and our terrible air quality here in Sacramento, we've got the 5th worst air quality in the nation. It has to change. And with the fires from the climate change and the prolonged lack of rain that we have in this Mediterranean climate, we literally just had our first real rain since May. We just had it yesterday. That tells you how serious this is getting, the length of time between rain. And our fire season was horrible. We were breathing smoke, very dangerous smoke, for weeks at a time, could barely see the sun. And this has to change. So we felt it was time to declare a climate emergency and do something about it as a utility. So I'll give you a brief overview of SMUD and the current energy climate in California, followed by what led us to undertake the moonshot goal, as we call it, and how we're going to make it happen. So SMUD's been providing electric service in California now for 75 years. We basically annexed ourselves out of the PG&E territory around us, and that was in 1945. Our service territory encompasses 900 square miles in Northern California, all of Sacramento County, and some small slices of neighboring Placer and Yolo counties. We are the nation's 6th largest public utility, serving 640,000 customers and a population of 1.5 million. We have a diverse power supply with approximately 1,000 megawatts of gas-fired generation, 688 megawatts of hydro in the Upper American River Project in the Sierra Nevada, all the way up to the peak of the mountain. We have, I think, now 8 dams all the way down. They've been there a long time. But we also have a large portfolio of contracted renewable resources. Factoring in our hydro, our mix is now about 50% carbon-free. So SMUD's rates are also among the lowest in the state, 38% lower than our neighboring investor-owned utility, PG&E. So we've been top-rated California utility in customer satisfaction for nearly 2 decades running, and are respected across the country and even the world as an environmental leader. And again, that's many thanks to David Friedman, as you mentioned, Wendy. SMUD is governed by a 7-member board, of which I am one, and we appoint our CEO and general manager, who is responsible for the SMUD's daily operations. We do not get into the daily operations. We set policy, goals, and budget. As for my background, I am the founding director of the National Stewardship Action Council and the California Product Stewardship Council, dedicated to recycling and reducing waste by driving a circular economy. So my worlds are basically in utilities, waste, and now electricity. So it's all very applicable and very overlapping. A lot of the work I'm doing with solar panel recycling and battery recycling and windmill blade recycling is all related to energy. So it's all working together well. I ran for the SMUD board in 2018 because I saw it as a way to serve my community again and to put my beliefs into practice. Our home, which we just left and moved into a new one, was 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and we had our energy bill about $50 a month because we had solar hot water, all LED lighting, radiant barrier in the attic. I walk the talk. I've got an electric car. This is just who I am. It's not just a job. I suppose that you could say, yeah, I walk the talk big time. My husband and I are very, very committed. And in this new house, we put in already the heat pump, water heater, and done the same thing with the LEDs. And we've got clips on the brand new roof for the solar panels, should we choose to get them, and so forth. But we really do believe that you can't tell other people what to do unless you're willing to do it yourself. SMUD has a long history of pioneering renewable energy programs and pushing the standards in a greener direction. In 2018, we reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% from 1990 levels. And we've helped grow the market for solar development by providing $130 million in customer incentives to install solar on more than 15,000 local rooftops. My old house was one of the original homes and still is running today very well. Of course, if we were to use the same footprint, we could double the output if we got new panels, I believe, at this point. Our voluntary green energy program is called Greenergy, and it's one of the most successful in the country, as is our free shade tree program, which is again started by David Freeman. Our accomplishments helped us secure $127 million smart grid grant from the U.S. Department of Energy in 2009, which was the largest awarded to any California utility. So we're on a familiar ground when it comes to taking innovative approaches to environmental stewardship. Just my being on the board was not the first. They have a long history of this, and I'm really proud of how far we're coming. And part of that is due to our location in the capital of California, where we've adopted some of the most aggressive clean energy and carbon reduction goals in the world. The state's utilities must have 60% of their power mix come from renewable sources by 2030. But we've pushed that to 100% at SMUD. California is leading the way. So why does SMUD feel the need to go even further and move faster? And that is because, as I said, we have really realized we have to move faster. The climate is changing right in front of us. We can see in a human lifetime how the climate is changing. that means it's way too fast. And we have to do everything we can now, all hands on deck, to slow it and start sequestering the carbon we've already released. So the answer is staring us in the face. We have to do this now. The biggest reason from a local standpoint, though, is for decarbonization is that it will greatly improve our immediate air quality here in the Sacramento Basin. Sacramento is situated in the middle of two of the dirtiest air basins in the country. Our childhood asthma rates are off the charts. The American Lung Association's 2020 State of the Air report, they rank Sacramento as the 5th most polluted in the country. And we've chosen to take this on with everything we can do to change it. Next slide, please. So in 2018, SMUD staff developed and the board approved a 2040 energy plan that committed SMUD to achieving a net zero greenhouse gas position by 2040. The California Energy Commission approved our plan in early 2020, saying that SMUD's filing lays out an ambitious roadmap for lowering greenhouse gas emissions in the Sacramento region while maintaining low rates and reliability. And the reason low rates are important is you can't get people to electrify if the rates start screaming up. So we have to not only reduce our carbon, we have to keep the rates low, and we have to do it while we keep the power reliable. If we don't do all three together, we will not be able to move the country quickly to renewables. So by committing to invest nearly $7 billion over the next 20 years, the benefits of the 2040 plan will be spread across the entire region. SMUD's approach maximizes local investment in renewable energy and electrification of buildings and transportation. It will drive inclusive economic development, create jobs, spawn innovation, and help bring environmental justice to historically underserved communities. This is also very important that we keep everybody with us as we achieve these goals. The key element of the 2040 energy plan is a $2 billion investment in the electrification of buildings and transportation. And as our reliance on carbon-based fuels decreases every year, increased electrification of two of the largest energy users, the buildings and transportation, will greatly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve local air quality, and spur economic development. And on the building front, we're partnering with developers to create all new electric single-family and multi-housing developments. On the transportation front, we're greatly increasing our investments in such electric transportation solutions as charging infrastructure, electric school buses, managed charging pilots, and more. Next slide, please. So this past summer, the SMUD board made an even stronger statement. So I've talked about the emergency climate change declaration to move us to net zero. It originally was net zero carbon by 2030. But our new CEO and general manager, Paul Lau, whom we just hired in August, who, by the way, is a Chinese immigrant, came as a child at 11, learned English, put himself through Sacramento State University as an engineer, and came all the way up through SMUD to be our new CEO, which we're very excited about him taking over. He has set the goal to be just zero and believes that we can do it. The difference between net zero and zero carbon is significant. Zero carbon energy is provided solely by non-carbon sources such as solar, wind, and hydro, and biomass. Net zero carbon, on the other hand, can be produced by burning fossil fuels, but with carbon offsets to neutralize the emissions. And this is a good slide of our vision. And of course, you'll have this to reflect on. It's a little bit much for probably a slide, but it's good information. Next slide, please. So our 2030 zero carbon plan, it's going to focus on 4 main areas. First, we're going to look at proven clean technology. This encompasses wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, biomass, short duration battery storage, and demand response. These are technologies and resources we have already at our disposal and are already included in our carbon reduction efforts. And while today's carbon-free technology isn't capable of getting us to zero carbon, these resources can get us very close, at least 80 to 90% of the way, is based on our calculations. Now, the new technology and business models and potential partnerships, in this category, we will identify new technology and business model options that enable us to work with partners in researching, piloting, and possibly bringing to scale new technologies. This could include power to gas technologies such as hydrogen and methane, and long duration energy storage options such as flow batteries and compressed air storage. New business models may include virtual power plants. These are networks, as you know, of decentralized medium scale power generating units such as wind farms, solar parks, and combined heat and power units. While these options aren't ready to scale to the levels we need yet, they do hold the potential to replace natural gas generation. We currently have 5 natural gas plants, one really big one, which is quite clean for a gas plant. But what we're looking at is we had some folks come and say, oh, we want to close the gas plants. Not necessarily. That can be very expensive with that kind of capital investment we've got in those plants. Can we retool those plants to burn clean fuel, keep the rates low, and still address climate change and local air quality? I think we can, and that's what we're trying to do.
Hey, Heidi,
Yeah.
are you close to wrapping up
Yeah.
so we can get
Yep.
to our other panelists too?
Sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if I had a time limit. The natural gas generation retirement and retooling. I think I just talked about the financial and regulatory strategy. Basically, we're going to look at grants. We're partnering. We've started a California Mobility Center to attract a lot of investment from outside of California on clean transportation options. Next slide, please. And our community engagement and strategic partnerships. Again, the board, the staff, we're all working with the customers. Actually, today even, we're having stakeholder meetings with the public to make sure they understand what we're trying to do. We hear from them, how is this going to work? And they help us educate their neighbors. And we're all out there doing this together. We cannot do this alone. The community has to come with us. And that's also working with the regulators, making sure barriers are out of the way, and that we've incentivized the behavior we're looking for. Next slide, please. So we're going to lead the way towards a zero carbon future. We're hoping we can lead the country in this effort and show everyone how to follow while keeping the rates low and the power on, while we're creating new jobs and building a sustainable economy. My primary responsibility really is to serve the 170,000 or so people in my Ward 7 to the best of my ability. But I do take very seriously that our role as a national leader and encouraging other utilities to shoot for the moon. You can see behind me, one of my favorite sayings is aim for the moon, because even if you miss, you land amongst the stars. And then my other picture over here is from the Smithsonian, that there's no place like home. There is no other planet to go to. We have to preserve this one, and we have to move fast. So I'm very proud to be a member of SMUD and to work with all of you. This is going to take all hands on deck, as I said, and I look forward to hearing the other speakers. Thank you so much for having me, Wendy.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. So for those of you that might have joined midstream, we're talking about all of the great things that are happening at the local and state level to advance 100% renewable energy. The federal government gets a lot of attention, but I tend to think that the real work often happens at the local and state level. So that's what we're featuring today. So our next speaker is Senator Charles McElhenny from Pennsylvania. He's retired from the Pennsylvania legislature, but while he was in the legislature, he was a leading proponent of transitioning Pennsylvania to renewable energy, introducing legislation to transition Pennsylvania to 100% renewable energy by 2050. That bill has been reintroduced. And we hope maybe this time around we can get it. And we're anxious to hear from the senator about his work as a Republican in the Pennsylvania legislature leading this effort. As I think Johanna said at the beginning, one of the things that we love about 100% clean energy is that it is something that everybody can get behind, because we all want clean air to breathe and our kids to be free from asthma. And so we think there's huge potential to build a bipartisan coalition around it. So with no further ado, Senator, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Emma, for having me. Pleased to be here. And I would like to just talk a little bit about the politics. This is what it's coming down to, is changing public policy and politics. And my experiences here in Pennsylvania. One of the first things that I guess when I started forgive me, Dave Mazur told me it was the first 100% renewable energy bill passed or I introduced, I guess, in the country way back. I don't know if that was in the country or not, but it certainly was in Pennsylvania. And it did raise a lot of eyebrows at the time. You know, we're in the middle of a boom in natural gas drilling here in Pennsylvania. And to have something that you would put out there and say, we're going to completely transition away and have 100% renewable. And I never really focused on the date. I think it was 2049. I said, let's not worry about the date. Let's worry about things that we can actually all talk and agree upon. And I guess to that point, it's keeping your audience and keeping the discussion going. And if I went to talk to the legislators and both Republican and Democrat and understand what Pennsylvania's like, the rural Democrats are going to be against it more than the suburban Republicans. And that's just the way the makeup is. So it's not a Republican Democrat thing. It's about where you live and your economic status in the state. So it's really an idea that do we want to have 100% renewable energy for everybody someday, at some point? And when everybody can say yes, nobody says no 100 years from now, I don't want to have 100, I still want to burn coal. Nobody says that. But getting to that point and keeping them there, because if you put a bill out there that says you must ban coal, you're going to lose a big chunk of your audience. And we need that audience to get past 50% to pass any laws. So I need to convince them to slowly move towards a 100% renewable portfolio energy without putting direct restrictions on it. And this is, I know in other states it works differently, that you have enough people that would like to ban coal in their state or ban a certain product in their state. Now that's not going to happen here in Pennsylvania though. So you have to take a different tack to it. The tack that I was more likely to take is let's support the renewable energies the same way we subsidized oil for generations. We subsidize it as a national security issue to keep it there. Well, it's energy that should be subsidized. That's the national security issue. That's what we need to have. And how we get there should be by subsidizing all the sources of energy to the best of everybody. And whatever technology rises up, that's the one that's going to win. And we didn't have to, if you go back, we didn't have to ban horse and buggies to have the automobile replace it. The automobile replaced it, the technology replaced it on its own. But let's set the target. Let's discuss the fact that we should have 100% renewable target at some date. And how we get there is going to change dramatically over the next 30 years. I said to a lot of the legislators at the time, this is going back, I think it's like 8 years ago, and I said, in 2049, where are you going to be? Now, I was in the Senate, and there are a lot of old guys in the Senate, and they said, oh, I'm going to be dead. I said, well, then do you really care about a target future date? You're setting a goal so that at some point we can figure out, when technology comes along, we can actually implement that, and we're set to do it. So that's the key is the biggest key, I guess, to it is don't lose your audience. Don't say, well, it's because of global warming, we need to change everything. You're going to lose a whole target audience. Just say, don't you want to have this at some point in the future? And shouldn't we, as the current policymakers, be setting some goal for our state to get to that, and then worry about the technicalities later and nuances later instead of jumping it. Now, I know there are people in this country and a lot of the states that they will pay extra money and suffer extra conveniences for 100% renewable energy. But I'm telling you, in places like Pennsylvania, 80% of the people will not do that. They will not pay and it's not that they don't even want to. They would like to, but economically, they just can't afford to pay triple the energy cost for something that isn't immediately affecting them that week. Like that's happening right now. So they're focused on their different priorities, and you have to keep that audience there. They're still voters. They still come out and they have influence on their legislators in those districts, but you cannot push them into a position of, you either agree with me for these reasons or you go away and you're wrong and stop listening to them, because you have to convince them in other ways. And I think it's been coming that way. I mean, if you look at how many signatures came on to the bill just this year, 400% renewable, and who actually came on to that bill, a lot of people, a lot of legislators in Pennsylvania have moved towards that concept, and at the same time have not had to disparage the natural gas industry or go after the coal. It was just kind of a policy shift that's saying we still need to get there, and we're going to continue to figure out how to get there in the coming years. And as you see, technology and fuel cells and technology and battery capacity, every year they're coming up. Solar's getting better. It's getting cheaper. So that if you keep focusing on that and say, keep putting some money, some subsidies into that area, eventually the technology will take care of itself, and we'll get to it by the year 2049. So that's been the experience that we're going to work on in Pennsylvania. I know it's different in other states. I'm looking forward to hearing how other states are going to handle it. But in a carbon-rich environment of Pennsylvania, I guess it's how we have to attack it on a local level to get something done. So I'll end it with that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we have one last speaker, and then hopefully we'll have time for a few questions. And I see some in the chat already, which we can either, Anna, you can either add that in, or we can come back to it. Our last speaker is from Florida, from the central part of Florida, Orlando, home of Disney World and other exciting things. Representative Anna Eskamani has been a sponsor of 100% clean energy bill in Florida, working closely with our Environment Florida staff. And we're excited to have her join us because obviously Florida, like California, is a land of sunshine. So there should be plenty of potential for renewable energy there. She's also the first Iranian American to be elected to a state office in Florida, so that's exciting. So thank you for joining us this morning, and we're anxious to hear how it works in Florida. How are we going to win in Florida? I mean, it may not be Pennsylvania, but it has its own problems, right?
Right, many. So it's great to be here, and thank you, Wendy, for facilitating. And I'll be brief with my remarks because I do want to give time to Q&A, and it's awesome to be followed by such incredible leaders from across the state and to see bipartisan support and effort on renewable energy. So again, my name is Anna Eskamani. I ran for office as a first-time candidate back in 2018, flipped a seat, and then kept it this past November. One of the issues that I ran on was clean energy, clean air, and clean water, and really helping to paint the picture of how these are all interconnected, how it's not a liberal issue. It's actually one, like my colleague from Pennsylvania talks about, that's linked to national security. It's linked to economic health and well-being. It saves you money. It also saves the earth. It protects our tourist economy here in Florida. And really just trying to bridge those gaps that so often get lost in the political narrative around these issues. And so when I got to the legislature in Florida, I was actually quite shocked to learn that there was no other lawmaker talking about these issues or even filing bills on these issues. So I knew that out of my 6 bill slots, because we're limited in the Florida House, that one of them would be a renewable energy portfolio to really set the tone for Florida to be a leader on these issues. And just for some more context too, despite being the Sunshine State, renewable energy only fuels about 4% of Florida's net generation in 2019. As folks probably know, most of our renewable energy that we do have comes from solar and biomass, but yet we have the greatest potential in the country, one of the top 5 states to expand on renewable energy and to really grow in this area, not only for the reasons that we talked about, but obviously it's a job creator. And I penned an op-ed yesterday that was published that focused on how to take Florida out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And part of that proposal would be to invest in clean energy jobs, especially not just the creation of solar and installation of solar, expanding rooftop solar, decentralizing the energy grid, but also thinking about energy efficiency programs, which unfortunately on both fronts of energy efficiency goals and energy renewable goals, Florida is the bottom. We are the complete bottom. We have a public service commission that's appointed by the governor. And so you can imagine that many of those folks, though good people, tend to side with the investor-owned utility companies in Florida. And since we have a regulated market in Florida, the utility companies decide, what their pace is. They make a decision on how they produce energy, when they want to shut down power plants. And there are a lot of incredible grassroots campaigns, including efforts led by organizations like the Sierra Club and different environmental justice organizations trying to have our coal power plants close and to really ramp up our renewable energy production. which brings me to our bill that we are refiling for the third time now. And I'll definitely post the op-ed in the chat for you, Beth. I appreciate the request, so I'll get that in a second. But the legislation that we're filing again, we are going to make a few changes to it, but it's Florida's 100% renewable energy goals bill. And the past versions we filed, it's a very simple bill. It essentially sets a renewable energy goal by 2050 to be 100% off fossil fuels by 2050. With that requirement, a task force has to be created under the Department of Energy to then build the policy plans to get us there. And my intention in doing that is it has to be a bipartisan plan. It has to be a Florida-specific plan. So I do want to give an opportunity for all stakeholders and my colleagues to be involved in that planning process, but obviously getting to zero when it comes to carbon neutrality and also moving towards renewables, it's going to take a panel of policy decisions that we have to debate as a body, and none of that debate has happened thus far. The bill that I'm refiling is going to actually make the goal more ambitious. We're setting a goal of 2035 because technology has changed so much in the last 5 years that I feel pretty confident that a state like Florida can move a lot faster and that we have to move a lot faster. And again, I do think the pandemic for us in Florida, we are experiencing major unemployment. If anyone here has loved ones or friends that live in Orlando or in parts that are very tourism heavy, then you know how much we're hurting here in Central Florida. My office is flooded with unemployment claims every single day, and it definitely ignites the opportunity to retrain our workers into these important fields that, again, are not only going to be great paying jobs, but will also put Florida's energy production on track to compete with our other states and to get us off carbon. So I'll toss it back to you, Wendy, for any questions, and I'll grab my op-ed. I actually have 2 op-eds that I've written that integrate these subjects, so I'll post both of them in the chat.
Okay, great. And I've also posted in the chat a link to Environment America's webpage about clean energy, which is a good resource for additional information about what's happening. Because in an hour, it seems like so much time, but it's so hard to get to all of the possible topics that we could get to. So we have about 10 minutes left that we can do some questions. The first question that I saw was from one of our supporters here in California, Renee Dake Wilson, and she wanted to know about public health, and is that a better way to talk about the issue than climate necessarily? And I think each of you touched on that a little bit, but does anyone want to talk a little bit more about that?
I think I responded in the chat. That's exactly the problem I had with safe medicine and needle disposal and getting the producers to pay for a statewide program, which we did pass that bill in 2018, and it rolls out next year in California. But we couldn't get it on water quality and the fact that everybody was flushing all these medications down the toilet, and we could prove it was in the fish and in the shellfish. But that wasn't what sold it. What sold it was the drug epidemic and fueling the drug epidemic and the public health. And that came through also because local governments have a responsibility to protect public health. And so that was what the courts found for us. So when we were challenged by Big Pharma all the way to the US Supreme Court in defending that local ordinance in Alameda County, the lawyers pulled out all the environmental arguments out of the court case and said, we don't want to end up in a rat hole of science debate over the impact of water. We're going to just focus on the fueling of the epidemic. And I've just seen this happen over and over again. Those of us that really care about the environment realize really nothing else matters if you can't breathe clean air and have clean water, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people don't. It's an immediate, right now sort of thing, reaction. And so I think public health always is where I start if there's a public health argument.
And just to add to that real quick, Wendy, I put this in chat too, but I think storytelling is a very important component of this. And it's hard to get an everyday person to understand climate change and even energy policy. It is so complicated. And I am not an engineer. I've had to learn this stuff, from scratch. And I know that many of my Democratic colleagues don't even understand some of the gears. And so storytelling is so important to move people on issues. And it's easier to tell stories about clean air and clean water and attach them to fossil fuels and pollutants and hold corporations accountable. And so I think that's also where we have to find ourselves is meeting people belly to belly. And it might be hard for them to think about climate change, but they can definitely think about the fact that when they walk outside, their kids don't have clean air. And the reason why is that we're so reliant on fossil fuels with our cars and so forth.
Right, that makes perfect sense. We had another question, Johanna, which maybe is a good one for you, about how this all fits into the federal policy work. I mentioned that there's a lot of discussion about what President-elect Biden is going to do around clean energy. So talk a little bit about how this work connects to that.
Sure. I mean, I think it's kind of part of the virtuous cycle. The progress that we see at the state level drives the ambition of some of our national leaders. So, President-elect Biden has put forward a goal of 100% renewable electricity by 2030. It's faster than the California timeline by 15 years, which, is exciting. And I think really speaks to how much has happened at the state and local level to get clean energy ready for prime time. We also see really bold and ambitious energy and climate goals in policies like the Green New Deal or in Senator Udall's bill for 100% renewable electricity standard nationwide. But I think the political reality is that we are not going to pass comprehensive and transformative clean energy policy at the federal level right now. And I think so it speaks to the need to continue driving local leadership, driving state leadership, kind of taking whatever lemons you have in your state and making the best possible lemonade you can, and then using that to help move forward. Because whatever we do, we need to do it in such a way that we bring people with us and that wins hearts and minds and gets more and more people to lean into this. What we can't afford to have happen is to, put out a big goal and then not be able to follow through and have people lose confidence on it. And I think that's where the state and local leadership is just really in the driver's seat of moving America towards 100% renewable energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We have a question from Facebook about how a citizen in a state can help make this happen in their state. Who wants to take that?
Talk to their local legislator. The more times you hear from, and make sure it's your legislator. Don't talk to the guy next door, because they really don't care if it's not your constituent. But if they want to hear from their constituency, and that's the key, is to talk to them. And if I could just touch on that health issue again, in Pennsylvania, it was about we have a fish warning. You're not supposed to eat, officially, not supposed to eat a trout from the streams in Pennsylvania more than once a week. And pregnant women are not allowed to eat them at all. It's from the mercury oxide, and it's not even from our state. It's the air dropping in from other states coming in. But that has a lot more impact on rural legislators than talking about any global warming impact on them.
Right. That's a really great point. Yep.
Yeah. So not just the air, but sometimes
it gets into the water. Well. I'm going to be a smart guy here and say it, but a lot of the legislators are in the mountains. If you're living in the mountains, they're going to have oceanfront property. If the waters rise, they make those jokes. So come on, is it really going to rise up to wipe them out? But they're going to get that they can't eat that trout that they're trying to catch each week. So,
yeah, that makes perfect sense. We also had a question from a young person asking, what can they do? They're just getting involved in the field. How can they help? Johanna, you've been a long time trainer of young people.
It's true. There are so many entry points into this work. So if you are, I'm guessing, let's say college age, look for organizations who are doing this work and do an internship with them. I know my team is actively hiring interns right now. So consider yourself recruited. Send me an email and I can get you plugged into that, and we can see if it's an opportunity you're excited about. And then I think one of the most important things I think for young people is don't sideline yourself by just studying the issues. Take action. And the Environment America website has a ton of resources, and we can help get you connected.
And then use your platforms to bring more people along, right? It's been pretty incredible to see social issues take over TikTok. and whatever skills you have as the young communicator to also help translate some of the what feels a little out of reach for some people, like bringing that down to a level that really translates well, and know that you are a leader and you're building power in your community. You're an influencer in your community, whether it's on a social media platform, in your classroom, or at your church. Like, that is your space. And so just realize that whatever advocacy you do within that environment is going to be really, really impactful.
Representative Escamani, can you talk, I mean, the senator talked, he had a couple of tips about contacting your legislators, which is to contact your legislator, not somebody else's, which is sort of, like, anyway, that's good advice. What other advice do you have to, what people do you end up listening to? Do you end up responding to? Do you end up thinking like, I need to call that person back?
Right. Well, I respond back to as many people as I can. I think, my biggest strength and curse is that I don't want to say no to anyone. But what I will say is that Johanna brought up a good point of like local governments. And so obviously, I'm a state lawmaker, right? So we have a part-time legislature in Florida. It is a very difficult environment to push these issues. However, Florida has been a leader at a local level. I'm in the city of Orlando, and I just took a tour with our municipal utility company last week, and went to their laboratory. So got to see some of the battery technology they're piloting, the research they're doing with floating solar. They're bringing in hydrogen fuel, and that's the first time in Florida we're seeing hydrogen fuel be piloted and researched. The investor-owned utility companies are now doing the same. They're attempting to mimic some of the work at our municipal utility. And so I think that get to know your city commissioners and your county commissioners too, because if the state is not going to set a portfolio for renewable energy, then working with local governments and even colleges and universities, like I think any type of public institution can establish its own renewable energy goal. And that helps a state then make the same transition. Because, for example, if we have the biggest cities in Florida say that we're going to be renewable energy based by this year, it makes it a lot easier to get Florida to agree, because they see the momentum already happening. They see the community pressure, and it's just going to be an easier transition because so many others are already doing it. So you're not alone. Which also reminds me to remember that, yes, we are the United States, but states also rely on one another. I mean, my colleague from Pennsylvania just talked about how air pollution is coming from other states into Pennsylvania's waterways. I would add that in Florida, we're not, if we don't work with states like Georgia to maybe even bring in renewable energy from Georgia to power our homes, it might be harder for us to also reach these goals. And so I do think we have to think more thoughtfully about interstate relationships to move towards renewable energy, because states like Florida, we're very limited in other types of renewable energy of just what's available to us, where I think we do have to tap into other states to help. And so trying to also think about it in a regional relationship, right? And why not be able to do something nationally, but I think regional partnerships can really bring us forward. We're seeing that in South Florida with counties coming together and building their own compacts. So just something else to think about as advocates.
Okay, great. I think we're at the end of our hour. So I want to thank those participants who stuck with us for the hour. I want to thank our panelists for taking the time out to join us and share your words of wisdom. We hope that all of this helps to move the country to clean, renewable energy. We will send out a follow-up email with any links for additional information. And we're, again, so grateful that you joined us, and hope that you'll join us again the next time we do something like this. Thank you so much.